What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live. We've got a pretty fun, at least what I think of as a fun stream for today. We've gotten a lot of questions over the multiple different months between like when we announced the GH6 and then moved forward with that. We've gotten a lot of people that ask us questions, for recommendations on like how to set cameras up for different styles of shooting. And when we have different conversations about like the autofocus conversation last week, the varying different styles of how to use your camera for, say, a interview style conversation, like what we kind of do on these streams. And it got me thinking that, kind of showing how the three main ways that I use our cameras for recording as a way to kind of just hopefully provide some information for some users, show a couple of different accessories that we use, different media types, that kind of stuff. And then just allow this to be an open forum for anyone that, kind of either has their own preferred way to set things up, to share it out to the community and, kind of add to the conversation. Volume seems low. Okay. I can probably try to fix that. I also might have my mic a little further away than I normally do. Okay. So the mic should be a little bit louder now. I repositioned it so it's a little bit closer. But yeah, so we're gonna go through this stream. I'm gonna show you a couple of the different things that I have my camera set up for. So as the description says, things like how we record LUMIXLIVE and how we share this out. So that's definitely gonna be one of the topics. We're also going to talk about how when I go out into the field for LUMIXLIVE, the kit that I typically use when I'm going out that way to shoot. But then also if I'm just going out to go create both photos and videos on a more casual sense, between my two preferred cameras that I've been using most often right now. Throughout this entire stream, like we've done forever, these are completely open, interactive streams. So if you have a question, drop it in the chat, ask it, and we'll definitely try to get to it during the stream. And then I also have some of the questions that were dropped in the comments from last week's stream that I also want to address through this. So if you are new to these streams, these are weekly broadcasts that we do. Sometimes we'll have people jump on with us and, from engineers, other photographers, videographers, where we'll talk about projects that they're working on. Or like we've been doing more often recently, it's usually just myself and going over some more technical oriented sides of the camera, and then really just, kind of offering a live Q&A session. But before we go further into the topics, I want to remind everybody about LUMIX Pro Services, like I do every week. We have, in the United States, we have the Red and the Platinum tier available. Red is a free level service that you get when you purchase a LUMIX camera from an authorized US dealer. You get yourself registered for it, it's free. Get you your 3-year extended warranty here in the States. And then you also have the Platinum tier, which is an expanded version of the LUMIX Pro Services for those that want that extra level of protection on their equipment. That gets you better deals on out-of-warranty repairs, so you get a 20% off for out-of-warranty repairs if you drop or break something. You also get access to our exclusive member hotline, so if you need to call somebody during business hours, you'd be able to actually speak to a person instead of over chat. But you also get 2-day repairs with next-day shipping both ways, so if you really need your equipment back fast. The Platinum tier is definitely going to be a real solid addition to your setup. If you are not joining us from the US, if you're joining us from overseas, we do have LUMIX Pro Services available in a number of other countries. The link is down in the description below, where you can get information on that and check out what's available in your region, and then there are different tiers that are available. So let's start this off by addressing a couple of questions. I see we've got one question that came in from Unplugged here. It says, how does it work if you want to live stream with a LAN cable? They've tried everything, and it seems it only works via Wi-Fi, but for mass events, LAN cables would be better. And then it looks like you're using a GH5 Mark II. Yeah, so this is one of the, I think, maybe a little more confusing things about how the system works. So an Rtmp server, if you're going to be sending footage out directly into YouTube, like what we do here, or Twitch, or whatever platform, That typically is still going to be done over Wi-Fi. The LAN connection on the GH5 Mark II allows you to send out an RTSP video feed, which would be anywhere from 4K 30, 4K 60, I believe, if I remember correctly, down into 1080, 60p. Those ways of working with the camera, you're going to want to have those go into some sort of encoding software. Whether that is using something like OBS or Streamlabs or vMix or any of those kinds of programs. So you would set the camera up just like you've been doing, but when you go to stream and you turn it on, you have to actually then call out to that camera from the software. So we do have a stream devoted to that. I will have to double check and look and see if I can find the link quickly for it. And then we'll either add it in the comments below this stream, or I'll link it in a card up here right after the stream's been posted. That walks through how to set these things up, because the camera is going to be having an IP assigned, so you're going to be able to call right out to that camera, and then there's just a string of address that you drop in, which would be RTSP://camera/stream. That's going to be the most efficient way to get the highest quality out of the camera into a software that then's going to actually broadcast and stream out. Big benefits here, and this is kind of one of the things that we've done a little bit, but not a ton because of the style and how I work here. When you use an RTSP, there is going to be some latency by comparison to HDMI or SDI or even direct-in camera, depending on the overhead of how much your computer system has or your network, how much load you're putting on your network. So just keep that in mind when you're working with the LAN connections for the video feed out. And then just make sure that you have a fairly decent computer. Fairly decent's not maybe the best word for it. You want to make sure you have a fairly modern-ish computer that has hardware decoding for the video feed coming in. It'll just make things a lot easier if you're using one system to ingest that footage and then send it out. The only other thing that you have to really kind of maybe make sure of is, depending on how many cameras you've got, you want to watch how much upload and throughput you're putting through into your computer. In some cases, if you're talking that you've got a number of GH5 Mark IIs that are LAN connected over, and you're sending, say, a 50 megabit per second HEVC signal, the more of those you put onto the network, the more you're going to be using the data line that you have. So that's where getting things like a 2.5 gig or a 10 gig network switch and port on your computer is going to be ideal, just to make sure you've got more than enough throughput for the camera feeds. And then you want to make sure that the service provider that you're using has enough upload speed to send whatever the quality is that you want to end up actually using. So hopefully that kind of addresses your question, Unplugged. But there is another way that you can do wireless live streaming, or kind of faux wireless live streaming, where you're wired into your mobile device. Mute that. Where you're wired into your mobile device, and then that can help with stability if Wi-Fi is what's causing some connectivity challenges. Certain environments, Wi-Fi gets overwhelmed, and the network and the channels that you're working on may not be the strongest for you. So hopefully that helps. Let's see here. Follow-up questions that came through here. Brooks asks, on the S1, is there an APS-C mode or a crop mode on the photo side when shooting RAW? I'd love to be able to select this mode to get a bit of extra length on my tellies. So there isn't an explicit APS-C mode for photography on the Lumix cameras. It is something that I know we've had a number of requests for, and some questions about whether or not we can implement it quickly or easily. But ultimately, the way, if you've ever shot with our cameras where you use a aspect ratio, so say you shoot 1:1 on a Lumix camera, or a modern Lumix camera, I should say, when you take that raw file into your software, it's still the full 35 millimeter frame of it. It's just telling the software what the crop is. So in a lot of cases, that's usually what a lot of people use. But as far as an actual mode in the camera to lock it to an APS-C mode to capture, there isn't really anything that we have specifically built into the camera. If you put an APS-C lens on it, yes, it puts it into APS-C mode, because that's the circle of coverage for that lens, and adapters are smart to communicate that over as well. But yeah, there's not really an explicit mode in there. We can ask again. I know it's something that I would like to see. I just don't know if it's something that's high enough up on a priority list at this time to be integrated into a camera yet. Let's see here. Andy's asking, could you explain the focus limiter function on the GH6? I set my point, but apparently mine keeps focusing to infinity to the closest focusing distance despite me setting the limits. So with the focus limiter selection on the GH6, after you set your 2 points, make sure you're turning it on. One of the common things, and I hope this doesn't come across as me just diminishing the question, but most of the time when I've had this question asked, is it's usually after you go in and you set up how your distances are, you still have to turn the system on. And then you've got it set up. That should be all you need to do for it, and it should work perfectly fine after that point. If it's not, definitely let me know, either in the comments after this or through email, or reach out to me on one of the social platforms, and we can troubleshoot a little bit more for you and see. Let's see here. When possible, if you can address if there's a way of setting constant preview on with a flash attached. Unfortunately, there is no constant preview with a flash attached on our system. Yeah. Let's see here. John W. says, Lumix focusing does better at high frame rates. Could shutter run at 60 FPS, but video would record at 30 second readout if the other 30p could be just read at near focus area like the face. I'm not sure what the question is, but yeah, typically a CDAF style system does run better, at least especially with the way ours is designed. It does run better at higher frame rates because it has more data to work with. Things like 24 frame, 30 frame, they're pretty much working at the speeds and the data throughput that's coming in for those frame rates. So, some people have said that if you use a faster frame rate, so you go for maybe a slightly more staccato look, you can get a little bit better performance at things like 24 frames per second. But typically I suggest working at 30 or 60 frames per second. If you know that you're working in 24, I know that that's not usually a solution for you. But one of the cool things is that a lot of software tools out there have come out that actually can kind of make it easier to shoot at, say, like 60p and then deliver in 24 frame. So the software's gotten really good at creating 24 frame footage out of 60. I think one is Optical Flow. So that's kind of a one way that you could deal with it for the time being. Let's see here. Are we able to log gyroscopic data and create steady recordings in software on any out-of-the-box camera, GHS line? Is it hardware-specific? Competitors are having great results. So I think a lot of us have seen that, the update that came out with post-stabilization, which is really just electronic stabilization. My understanding is cameras have to be designed with a high enough precision gyro to do that. Now, we use incredibly high precision gyros in the S-series cameras and the GH6 and GH5 Mark II. As far as logging that data and then being able to interface it with software, I honestly don't know. I don't know if it's hardware, if it's a matter of actually collecting that information and then being able to communicate it and work with a program to decipher it and then apply it. But it is something that I know we've had some questions for, and we will do our due diligence and bring it up to the teams to see if there's something that can make sense, or if it's something that's doable with the existing setup, or if it does need a just different hardware solution for it. Sebastian was testing your GH6 with the APSC Ninja 5 and found in manual focus, as soon as you enlarge display pops up, the video on the Ninja gets choppy. It is also baked into the recording on the Ninja. When the enlarged display is off, it doesn't cause this problem. The internal recording is fine, but with the raw over HDMI update coming out soon, this is a problem. Okay, so two things here. For one, in the menu, you can turn it off so that under the HDMI menu, so that punch-in or enlarged AF or manual focus assist does not activate over HDMI. This is one of the things that did come back from the S1H. So there is a way to decouple them between the external monitor and on the camera. When it comes to RAW, it's not a problem. That information just it's not enabled when you're shooting in RAW. So if you want to do punch in to manually focus when you're working with, say, the GH6, when the RAW update comes out on the 5th, you're going to more rely on the tools in your monitor for punch in. That's the better way to do it anyway, because at that point you're using tools that typically are going to probably have more flexibility because of just the way they're designed. I have found that the Ninja series products and things like the Portkeys monitors, I find them fairly intuitive to be able to just quickly punch in, see my focus, punch out. And at that point, you're not imparting anything there. Sebastian says, I had punch in over HDMI turned off over HDMI. Okay. I will definitely check that. I think that's maybe why I was a little confused with the question a little bit, or not confused, a little surprised by it, because if that's off, it shouldn't be going out over HDMI. I will definitely check on my unit with my Ninja, and then I'll follow up with you on it. But that's how it's supposed to work. So if it's not, I can troubleshoot and see, and then we can kind of go back and forth and see if we can figure out if there's another setting that may be blocking it or changing something there. Let's see here. How about timecode? JC, LUMIX cameras, is the color science in the GH6 something that can come to the box cameras of the S line, so matching color is easier? So the GH6 uses this very, very similar color science to what you find in the S series and the BS1H, so the box full frame camera. What that means is that it's with that setup, you're using V-Log and V-Gamut, and you're using the more modern color designs. For older cameras, it's rare that you're going to see a color profile design or a color science change come back to older cameras. Not necessarily because they may not be able to handle it, or it's not necessarily a hardware problem. A lot of times you run into the question of, say if we take the GH5, the original GH5, if we made a change in a firmware that massively changed the color science into the newer updated versions that we use on, say, the GH5 Mark II or the S series, that can actually cause a lot more problems for those that are working with the GH5 and already have their workflows designed. It's a similar conversation that I know we had with, say, like the BS1H and a GH5S. Very similar sensors, very similar image quality out of the two of them. But the BS1 or the BGH1 had a different version of V-Log or V-Log-L installed on it. It was different tuning. It was designed for that platform, and the changes that came out throughout the years with it. If that just got backported and V-Log changed on the original camera, you would then run into problems where, you take the old camera, you put it into your workflow, you apply your normal edits to it, and all of a sudden now it's not giving you the result that you had. So it's not that it would never come back to older cameras. It's just that there's a lot of Q&A or QC that has to go into how do you do it right? How do you find the proper way to communicate it that there is a change to a color profile? And then what's involved with, do you version out different color profiles? We do version out different color profiles, of course. But within a camera, if you notice on modern cameras, we don't have Cinelike D and V alongside D2 and V2. We just switch to the newer color profiles with them. So it's a little bit different. Luckily, if you're shooting in log across the board, V-Log is designed to be an interchangeable color profile between all of the cameras that utilize it. So while colors may be slightly different due to the gamut that the cameras can cover, you should have a fairly easy method of getting them back to neutral. And then on top of that, there are some amazing people out in the community that are making some awesome normalization LUTs to get everything down to a 0, pretty much no matter what camera you're using. So there's a lot of cool tools out there already that kind of support this idea and make it kind of just that next step forward and more flexibility, so that you're not messing with a known good workflow just for a slightly new color science. Yeah, so hopefully that was a good enough answer for you. Let's see here. Brooks says, how about timecode or audio meters on the S1 info display? I have asked about that. I don't know if something like that's ever going to come back to the S1. There are certain things that if you need them and you want certain features, you've got to go for the proper tool for it. And that's a good segue. I'm going to get back to more questions after this, but that's a good segue into, selecting the right camera. So when we, kind of look at the different areas of content that are created out there, we have basically the best choice of cameras across the board in our current day and age. And I mean that in the industry-wide. You've got so many options available for so many different types of creation that it can get, kind of overwhelming a little bit, especially if you start looking at how to, take a camera that on paper it can do certain things, but there are better options, more efficient tools for it. And that starts with basically how we do LUMIX Live, right? So when we started LUMIX Live, I was using the S1H at the time, I believe. It was either the S1H or an S1 at the time when we started to do this. Actually, yes, it was an S1H. And at that time, a mirrorless interchangeable lens camera that's a DSLR styled camera worked, because that's pretty much what the mainstream had available. Our advantage with the cameras was that we had unlimited recording, we have no thermal issues, you're able to get a clean HDMI feed out, which a lot of this stuff now starts to sound very, kind of commonplace. Full-size HDMIs, clean out, things like that. But where you end up seeing the huge benefits with a lot of this stuff is that our S1H was able at the start to be able to do that clean HDMI out. I was able to power it over USB, and it would run and just continue running. I never had to worry about the camera. But that causes challenges. If you want to be able to change something, if you want to adjust your shutter speed or aperture or change your ISO, that meant that I would have to reach over to the camera, start manipulating it, change things around, look through the screen. And that is just not an efficient way to work if you're doing something where you've got a fixed position camera and you're recording content constantly in that platform. The other issue there is that a lot of us, if you're not someone who, works day in and day out in photography or videography, you may only have one camera. Or you're someone who just prefers to only have one camera. Well, that means that in those particular situations, that one camera is locked off for that shot. Then you have to take it down to use it for other aspects of your job. Again, creating inefficiencies. So with our streams, we very quickly evolved our streams from using the S-series cameras and the G-series cameras of the traditional design to using our box cameras. So the BS1H and the BGH1. Obviously, at first, the BGH1 is the one that came out originally, so that was the first one we started using. And that opened up a huge kind of amount of flexibility for what we want to try to create. That meant now that I can have a camera that's basically permanently affixed to my wall. I don't ever really take my BS1H or my BGH1s down off of my wall. They just stay there. So I have my BS1H is the main camera that we look at normally when we're going, face to camera. And then I have another one mounted up on my ceiling that faces down on my desk so that I can be looking and have, kind of another area where I can be working as a down angle. What these options bring you is full control. We've shown Lumix Tether before. We've had numerous streams on it. We did an entire stream about that. But that's where you start looking at the efficiency. For us, live streaming internally, you get the box camera. I don't ever have to touch the camera. It's all controlled through software, my ISO, aperture, even down into things like my menu control. If I'm recording audio into my BS1H, say for a training video, or for LUMIXLIVE, if I want to do a backup recording local on the camera, and I have a secondary microphone plugged into it, I don't have to do anything to trigger the camera for record. If I need to adjust my microphone, say the audio level's a little too hot in the camera, I can do all of that through software. That's not necessarily something you can do in a vast majority of mirrorless SLR styled cameras. So from this platform, that's how we primarily use the box style cameras for content creation. And I highly encourage you, if you haven't checked one out, definitely take a look at one. They're not made for every single platform and every single solution that you would ever want to go out and shoot with, of course. But it is the camera that's proper for these styles of content. Whether you're going to be mounting it to a wall, say you're going to be mounting something to a car, and you're going to be doing, say, talking head style video, or you're doing, say, like review content. There's a lot of YouTubers out there that do review content of, cars, things like that. Being able to mount a camera up to a wall and have it relatively small and compact, that's a huge thing. The other benefit, too, is that you start looking at what I/O does the camera have. The box cameras have the ability to power over Ethernet, which are the only cameras in our lineup that support that at this time, at least in the consumer side. That means that I have one cable that runs up to my box cameras that provides me power and control, so I don't have to have batteries attached to it. I don't have to be running, DC couplers into the camera. I'm not running a 12-volt, barrel jack off the side to the wall. It keeps things super clean. Right now, the only two cables that come off of my box cameras is an HDMI cable, which goes into an Elgato 4K capture card in my main computer, and then the Ethernet cable. So super simple, where if you look at the mirrorless cameras or the mirrorless DSLM style or DSLR styled cameras, you're looking at either a DC coupler, USB power output, and your HDMI, maybe a microphone if you want it as well. Those start to add up a whole bunch of extra pieces into the kit. So that's the primary camera that we use. When it comes to lensing choice for a lot of this stuff, we are almost always streaming these broadcasts using the 35mm f1.8. So I try to stick to a very consistent look, consistent style, consistent depth of field. So we're in with that, kind of modern style of what everyone wants, which is a shallowish depth of field, but it's not a totally blown out background. You can still make out some details behind me. And the 35mm I've always felt at about this distance is a pretty good option. And I'm about arm's length away, so I'm touching the lens hood right now, and it's about a couple feet away. So close focus distance is really good on this lens, and this combination just works perfect with it. The other thing that we do, because I had mentioned in the description that we're also going to be talking about some of the accessories that we use. For lighting, we use two of the Elgato key lights for this particular style of shooting. And if you looked at the thumbnail for this video, I have up a photo of my station here. I've got a 48-inch LG C1 OLED that I use as a desktop monitor. I've got a custom-built PC that controls all this stuff. I have a second stream computer here that offloads all of my software and is actually encoding and sending everything up. That's probably one of the easiest ways that you can do a live streaming setup. Now, for those that don't want to work on a desktop, relatively easy. You can still do this on a laptop. You just get an external capture device that's HDMI and you're good to go. They usually have audio input and everything, or you just take audio over your HDMI port. Speaking about audio for this type of content, once you've picked out the camera, if you're going to be using a box camera or a G series camera or an S series camera, audio becomes your next major choice. And we have a couple of different things that you can work with. Obviously, plugging right into the camera is probably one of the most streamlined ways to do this, and just using the audio over HDMI. Is it the best quality because you're going over HDMI? Not always, but you still have a ton of control. And if you're using a camera like the box cameras, you have, like I said before, that audio control through LUMIX Tether. So you still can go in and adjust your gain, adjust the levels, change things like that. So it still does give you a lot of control. But if you're using something like an S5, say like I want to use my S5 for a stream for some reason. If I were to plug in a microphone into this, whether it's to the XLR1 or a 3.5 millimeter into this, if I needed to make any of the audio changes to there, I have to reach up to the camera, fiddle around with it, make some changes, and then continue recording. So it's not easy to do on the fly. Box camera is much easier to do this on the fly and actually be able to change things very quickly. Aside from the changes that you can make in software like OBS, or now we've transitioned over to using the Streamlabs is the thing that we're using now. So basically, as you start kind of going through the setup, if you want to get something that's much better quality audio for a broadcast or for a kind of interview style, since in a lot of cases we can still be doing interviews and working on interviews remotely, this is where you can start looking at, do you want to start buying a much higher quality microphone that needs power? Or do you want to start using something like an external device like an ATEM that can take 3.5 millimeter in and then separate it from the camera? And actually, to Alan's point, audio over HDMI isn't necessarily a bad thing. I probably should have clarified that. It's not that it's bad. It's just not that it's not the best. There are much better ways to capture audio, especially if you're doing something like this. And in this particular case, this is where we've evolved our LUMIXLIVE platform a lot over the last couple of years. When we originally started this, we used a simple USB microphone that plugged into the computer. I think it was from Samsung. It was a great little product. It worked fine. But then you start wanting to, you get a better camera, then you want some better audio, you want some higher resolutions, things like that. You want to start being able to figure out what that next audio level is. And even something as simple as picking up an inexpensive cardioid style microphone, so like I have one like here, being able to take that kind of microphone and plug it into some sort of source on your computer can be a big advantage. Now, you do want to make sure that you're also paying attention to things like latency and stuff like that, but that's a different story. As you start to do that, you start to get microphones that don't need as much processing. And by processing, I mean noise cancellation through software. They can be more directional. You can start figuring out, do you want to go to lavaliers? Do you want to go to a microphone like what we use now? And then you have to start looking at, well, what kind of interface are you going to use? The ATEM works great for relatively low power, simple microphones. You can buy them online for relatively inexpensive. I mean, for 2 years, I ran a $40 microphone that I bought off Amazon. Until recently, I just picked up an Audio-Technica. I think it's I forget which one it is. Right now, we're using an AT2035 for this setup, but that microphone meant that as I updated everything, I also now had to get an actual an amplifier. So I have a separate amplifier now that allows me to do a little bit more control over the volume of the microphone. A lot of this stuff definitely just kind of adds into getting you that next level with it. So as I said, with our setup, we've moved on. And if you go back and listen to some of the earlier streams and then listen to a stream now, you'll definitely hear the big difference, especially if you go back to the first one. I mean, aside from quality, that was the beginning of the pandemic, to now you start to see how you can build all this kind of stuff up. So looking through each of these different setups, you just want to figure out which microphone works best for you. For us, I like using this I said cardioid mic before. I meant condenser. So this, like I said, this is still probably the best microphone that I'm using right now. It's a fairly simple, straightforward. They're not that expensive. And then I use a PreSonus audio box. That's a USB audio interface. And then I've gotten much better audio quality. Now it means that I don't have to be using software for noise cancellation. Normally I used to use the NVIDIA broadcast software. I don't have to use any of that anymore. It's just straight in here, and I control everything through the device here. So this is great. This is for if I'm now, I'm plugged in HDMI, so I've got my HDMI signal out, it's going into my computer, and then that's going into OBS, or in my case now Streamlabs, and cool, right? You've got everything there. But what if I want to be recording training material? I do a lot of training content for our internal team when a new camera comes out, when a new firmware update comes out. I basically have to learn the camera, and then I have to train our own staff so that they know how the camera can work. When it comes time to do those things, there's two options you have. What I just described for setting up a live stream works equally well if you want to just record and have everything on a computer instead of worrying about SD cards, things like that. The added benefit there is that, again, consistency in look and style. My camera's always here. It's always the same look. It's a fixed studio. I don't have to be worrying about taking a camera down. But also, you still have that added benefit that since we stream in 1080, the capture card I'm using is a 4K capture card, so I can bring in 4K 60p if I wanted to. I can still be able to just plug everything into the camera itself and then just record directly to media cards and then offload them, save them to the computer there. So you've got a couple of different choices. This is why if you're going to be doing fixed kind of content or in a studio, box cameras are just some of the best solutions for it. Leave your mirrorless, SLR styled bodies free for you to be able to go out into the field and do things with. So that's kind of the setup for LUMIX Live and roughly the way that we do, kind of training content. The only difference between LUMIX Live and the training content that we create is really just going to come down to if you need to be doing things like screen share, if you've ever worked in multiple clips before, or multiple inputs, audio sync can be a headache. This is where typically I will actually do where I'm recording dual audio. So I'll have my box camera set up with a XLR1 and a lavalier attached to it that I just run right to the shock mount for my Audio-Technica mic. And then I will be recording the HDMI feed out into OBS or Streamlabs with the higher quality audio that I get here, plus the scratch audio that the camera is going to be recording there. And then I'm just taking the video feed from the internal on the camera that's plugged into OBS, because now my audio is synced. I don't really have to ever worry about it. I just bring it in, match the waveforms, good to go. This allows me to intercut between what I'm screen capping on my computer if I'm going through, say, Lumix Tether, or if I'm doing an interview. That allows me to do that and then still have the best of both worlds with it and just very quickly cut between all of this. The nice thing with the box camera is that you can simultaneously record internally, output over HDMI, and output over SDI if you wanted to, so you could have multiple options of how you've got all of this footage coming out and working with it. So let's see a couple more of the questions that came in here. John W. Extended teleconverter function enables you to take pictures that are further enlarged beyond what is available with optical zoom without any deterioration in image quality. Yeah, that is one thing that you can do for the cameras that do have the EX teleconverter functionality. Some of the newer cameras might not have it, so it can work, but I usually don't recommend it as a final, kind of option for working with it. But yeah, let's just see here. Okay, Sebastian says it doesn't go out over HDMI, but the video feed on the Ninja gets choppy. Okay. That I'll definitely look into and see if it's something I can replicate on my end and determine whether or not it's on the Ninja side or if it's on the GH6 side. So I'll follow up on that one for you, Sebastian. Redbit, let's see here. DJI joined the L mount. Can we expect to use our Panasonic S lenses to pilot? Honestly, no clue. As far as what DJI's involvement in the L mount is, I think they made an announcement that they'll have an L mount version of one of their cameras. Outside of that, don't know. The L mount alliance is about the mount solution and the communication and protocols there. This is where I think there's been some confusion. L squared versus L mount. They're independent of each other. So because the L mount exists, that's where the standardization of the mount and communication protocols are. L squared is strictly just between Panasonic and Leica for technology and development and stuff like that. So there are some differences between the way these work. As far as whatever DJI is going to be doing with the system, you know that it's going to be its own thing. All at this point, actually. So it's Leica, Panasonic, Sigma, DJI, and Lights. There are now 5 manufacturers part of the L mount alliance. All of them work independently. There's no... we're all individual companies when it comes to manufacturing, developing products, designing things like that. L squared is where there's a little bit of a difference in the way things work. So, let's see here. Wonder if their system can be used to drive AF motors of the L mount. Time will tell. I mean, that's going to be up to how they develop and if they can make it work and if it gets accepted as a standardization into the L mount. That kind of stuff's totally up to Leica. If you go to lmount.com and you actually look and read, what the L mount means, how it works, that can give you some good information about some of those questions, Redbit. Let's hear. John W. The EX teleconverter minimum magnification ratio differs depending on the picture size, set in photo, image quality. Set M as 1.4, S20, 1.9 when using APS-C lens. Yeah, so there's a lot of... there's definitely a lot of complication in how those different systems work. Brooks. I really hope that you don't think I meant to not be lazy with it. What I was stating was just that the way our system works, it currently works, when you're using any kind of crop mode, or not crop mode, whenever you're using any kind of aspect ratio, which is the closest thing that I can reference to what you're asking, it's always recording the full area, and it's only telling the software that you're using a flag of what the crop was that you used. Yeah, so I really hope you understand. I don't mean asking for those features as being a lazy thing at all. I would like to see a crop mode for photography as well. Let's see here. Dark Pearls, LUMIX S5, next firmware update date. Even if I did know anything about it, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Let's see here. Something I feel it's important from a creator's perspective, the lenses. I have some lenses that are not LUMIX native, Olympus and Sigma. My LUMIX lenses function normally, but the other brand autofocus doesn't work properly on the GH6. They work better on your G9. I did some portraits with the Sigma 30 and the GH6, and it misses the face in many shots. I don't know if this is something that can be done, but I would love for a solution. Okay, so Andy, for something like that, it's not our lens. It's not our design or control over anything. So a question like that for anything that's outside of the LUMIX lenses would be to reach to the lens manufacturer and let them know that there may be a potential issue there. That's really how you're basically going to kind of get some answer there. And that's probably where you're going to get the most result out of seeing a firmware update. I'm a big proponent, and I know that I get, this gets pointed out a couple of times whenever I say it, is that always make sure your cameras are firmware updated. I know that there's a lot of people that are hesitant about updating firmware. While yes, a lot of times you want to maybe not be always the first person to update a camera. Know that when we release firmware updates, there's a lot of testing that we do internally. If you've been following us since Cinegear, actually since before Cinegear at NAB, we had the raw firmware update available on the GH6. We were demoing it and showing it off. So that gives you kind of an idea of how long some of these things are in a QC phase, and into some testing to make sure that, you know, they're actually working while you've got everything set up. A lot of that stuff's done. So usually the second a firmware comes out, I'm usually one of the first people that just jumps right in line and updates my lenses, my cameras, pretty much everything. I mean, even down to phones. I update those things the second an update comes out for them. So let's see here. Let's see here. Should have also mentioned the microphone is important for audio quality. That's what there does in video. It crops without a glass lens, extension tube. Also seeing you used to running. Okay, Alan says, I'm just so used to running a shotgun mic and a Tascam recorder and feeding that into the camera to be carried by HDMI to computer. Yeah, there are so many ways to do it. You know, for getting audio and better quality audio. At that point, it's a matter of, you know, yeah, are you using a decent quality HDMI cable? Don't buy into all the snake oil. You don't need $1,000 HDMI cable, people. That doesn't do anything. Watch videos about, I think Linus Tech Tips did the whole thing about HDMI cables. There are some bad cables out there that can degrade image quality and audio. But I'm a huge proponent of recording things separately, and then using the in-camera for kind of scratch audio. Let's see here. Jason, can you do a studio tour? I've thought about doing a studio tour. Everything that's off camera here is a mess right now. After coming back from Infocom and being sick for a couple of weeks, a lot of stuff is piled up. I want to do a studio tour, and I'll probably do it eventually. It's not going to be a full stream though. There's not a whole lot that I have around other than the computers and stuff. But what I will do at the end of this stream is I will actually go over what I use for the streaming and broadcasting and editing, and talk about the computer that I use for that. Let's see here. Happy camera day from yesterday. Oh yeah, that's right. Yesterday was another one of those, let's just create a day and it's National Camera Day. Brooks, it wasn't taken like that. Okay, good. Okay. I was legitimately worried. I never want to come across that way. Sometimes I just fumble over how I say, and yeah. So, okay, cool. Jason, using a GH5 as a live stream camera. The lens I use is noisy while focusing, so I opted for touch to focus, but it's not convenient using the screen, so I got a remote, but I can't use it for touch to focus. What lens are you using, Jason? I know some lenses can be noisy if they're older or if they're adapted lenses, things like that. Adapted lenses, if you're using an older EF style lens that's adapted through like a Metabones. One of the things you have to remember is that earlier DSLR style lenses were designed for phase detect systems that weren't coupled with sensors, which means that they operated a much slower speed. More on the point that the motors aren't designed to rapidly move. So that's where you can get like a chatter kind of noise out of some of those older lenses. That if that's the sound that you're getting, one of the things at that point is using, okay, so you're using a LUMIX 15. If that lens is making noise on you, I would reach out to the service team and have it sent in to be checked. I use that lens all the time on my GH5 Mark II, and it is totally silent in operation. The only time I've ever heard a lens make a noise in our system is older lenses, if I have constant preview turned on, because the aperture blades would move. Yeah, so I would definitely double check if it's not the aperture clicking. I would probably get it sent in the service, just to be evaluated, checked, cleaned, things like that. Because that lens is pretty quiet. At least I've never heard it, especially if it's mounted up for live streaming and broadcasting. I've never been able to pick up the audio from any of our lenses. Let's see here. Andy says everything is up to date. Camera and lenses. Reach out. Maybe I get a response. Thanks, John. Okay. Yeah, definitely. So for that, let's see here. John W. Some DJI gimbals, focus knobs control Lumix lenses. Lens focus directly with a motor. So LiDAR might come. There's a lot of things that may come down the line. If you look at the Ronin, which actually is a good segue for the next part that I wanted to talk about quickly, is working out in the field for content. As long as your Ronins, the SC2 or RS2 and RSC2 are fully updated, over USB, they can control a lot of the features in our cameras. They even have the active track functionality enabled in a number of the cameras now. So the communication's there. If DJI adds something to it and they can work it in with their USB control and send the information, who knows? Let's see here. Super Zero, what is the story with focus points? Lumix went from 225 to 315, yet other hybrid systems seem to have 425, then add 2 to 600. Why not at least 500? I think these days, we get maybe a little, obsessed over some of the numbers when it comes into it. And actually, Super Zero, your question is one I was going to address from last week. With focus points, yes, more areas can help, give more information. The thing is, and where I think you're a little maybe missed here with the comment, CDAF, contrast detect autofocus systems, do not use points in the same way that a phase detect system does. Think of on a CDAF style system or on DFD, it's more like areas that we use. So when we work with, say, the 225 in a GH5 Mark II or the S5, the S1, those cameras, a lot of that stuff is built because of that's what the engine works with. That's the processing that can be done. That's how we can divide the sensor area out into those regions for points. PDAF systems, when they reference how many focus points it has, that has nothing to do, from everything I've understood, it has nothing to do with CDAF points in that kind of setup. So while, yes, more can be better, it doesn't always equate to better. Always. It's just like how phase detect systems, while a lot of us have this common thought that PDAF is just inherently better than CDAF, it's not always. It's not as cut and dry as I think the internet makes it out to seem. It depends on the use cases, stuff like that. But more points in a phase detect system, cool, gives you more area. You have to mask more information out from the image because you're losing pixels. CDAF or contrast-based systems, the more areas or points that you use, it's more areas that it samples for motion. You typically, at least with our cameras, if you followed the generations over the years, we went from 49 points up to 255 in one generation. And that coincided with a change in a new engine, a new sensor. When the GH5 came out, there was a big jump up compared to the previous cameras. And then now with the GH6 having, 315 versus the 255, it's another major change. That's a totally new sensor and a totally new processor. You just get more information that you can work with. So some of this stuff is hardware based as generations move on and on. So, let's see here. And yeah, as Alan pointed out, with CDAF, basically every pixel or every piece of the image can be analyzed for focus. That's the kind of point of contrast detect systems. It's looking at the actual image for the information. Jason says he'll check constant preview. Super Zero says, why no battery grip for the GH6? Seems like a missed opportunity to to redefine use for ENG as integrated BG for GH series could be useful, especially in a large crowded event. Honestly, I've asked about this before, why we didn't put a grip on the GH6. And actually, I tend to lean towards the reasons why we don't have, or some of the reasons why we don't have a battery grip on the GH6. The vast majority of users on the GH5s, even though we had a grip for that were video users, didn't use grips. They worked with external power solutions. You're either rigging it up or you're, attaching an external power source to it through a DC coupler, because that would give you just infinitely more battery life than any camera is going to give you internally. And then now that external USB charging has gotten way more efficient, and the other accessories out there have gotten better at supporting these kinds of features, it kind of just made sense, at least for this, knowing the camera may be rigged up a little more, kind of just, allowed for a little bit better setup. And as FC pointed out too, is if you do have a battery grip attached to the camera, the only way to charge the battery in the grip, so the one in the camera and the grip, is to charge over USB, so that you're going to have that always attached. But my point with that being is actually as we talk about our, when I'm recording outside of the studio. So, we talked about the BGH1 and the BS1H. Those are primarily my in-studio cameras that I work with for LUMIXLIVE and training recording. But now when I go out into the field, I have two cameras that I work with. I will either be working with my S5 if I want to be doing a shallower depth of field style work with a little bit longer lenses. Typically that's where you'll see I'll use like the 35mm, the 85mm, or something like a 70-200, because I really want like a heavy compression in the footage. And those are great. I use that camera all the time. I record internally. I use autofocus and everything like we're doing on this stream as well. But ultimately, it's cool to have, but a lot of times I find that I stop the lens down a lot more. And for the type of recording that I do, I'm never recording and speaking for maybe more than, 15 minutes if I'm doing a video recording. So it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, it's pretty simple for the way this stuff works. I actually have to have everyone hang on for 1 second. Someone's at my door. I will be right back. Okay, everybody, I'm back. I apologize for the dog barking there. But where was I? Yes, so if I'm out in the field and I'm recording, I'll use that S5. I'll do longer telephoto lenses, and everything, kind of works. It's great. But what I have started to adopt myself to working with is actually my GH6. Now, I have a pretty different setup on my GH6 than we've kind of been using over time. So one of the first things that we'll notice here, so I'll give you a little bit of a close-up of my rig that I use if I'm going out to film. I have two different monitors that I'll use, either this Portkeys BM5WR or I'll use an Atomos Ninja 5. Just kind of depends on what mood I'm in working with at that time. I have a small rig Black Mamba cage attached to it. So simple, form-fitting, it's easy enough. I can mount my monitor to it, and I've got my small rig monitor. It's powered, short little small rig HDMI cable that I've got plugged in right into the camera. And then I power it through DTAP. So I just got, it's not the prettiest looking, but the rest of my cables are just all bunched up here. But as far as power solution goes, this kind of goes right to that point of the last question about battery grips. Even in my S-Series cameras, yeah, every once in a while I'd use a battery grip, but it's bigger, it's bulkier, it's heavier. What I've adjusted to using now is this setup. So this is an FX Lion Nano V-mount battery that allows me to have my DTAP plug in here in the bottom. So I've got DTAP right on the bottom here. And then it also has, this is weird working backwards, a USB-C power option here. So if we look at the back side here, I've got USB-C coming out of the FX Lion. And then I've got that run into my camera, and then my HDMI there, and this allows me to power both my monitor and my camera simultaneously, and keeps everything super simple. I still have the battery in the base of the camera, so if this dies, I've still got a backup in the camera. And then the nice thing with using this setup too is that, you know, if I've got a couple of these, one, I can just click the button, and this isn't going to show because of the reflections. It's got a status LCD on here, so I can tell how much power I have left in here, what the voltage is that's coming out over the USB cable, what's coming out over the DTAP port. But if I got to change it out, it's as simple as just pulling two cables. Simple. Click the red button and then just pull this off, and it's a small rig micro V-mount plate on the side of my camera. So this lets me very quickly change out and adjust however I want to shoot. The other thing is, I mean, yes, it'd be nicer if I had it mounted vertically as a handle, but usually I'm shooting like this, or I'm on a tripod, and the small rig cage has an Arca Swiss style base plate. So this lets me take my camera and then work with the other piece of accessory that I use, which is a simple Peak Design travel aluminum tripod. For this particular setup, I just removed one of the safety pins on it. It gives me my Arca Swiss attachment plate here, or my Arca style plate, and then it fits in a backpack. So going out into the field, if I'm using my Micro Four Thirds system, I'm using my GH6, that is my go-to rig all the time. That Black Mamba cage never comes off my GH6. I don't think I've ever taken it off the camera before since I got it. And then as far as power go, or memory cards go, I'm primarily using the Lexar 128 gig CF Express card if I'm doing ProRes. When the firmware update comes out on the 5th, we're going to be adding more ProRes options that allow you to go to SD recording if you're only going to need 1080 output. So you will be able to do that kind of stuff. Or I'm using, as far as SD cards go, I use some of the Delkin Black SD cards. I am starting to work with some of the Delkin Black CF Express cards, the newer ones that they came out with. Having really good luck with them so far. But just as a word for caution, the Delkin Black cards are not on the approved list for the GH6 at this time. So make sure to go to the global site, check out the compatible CF Express cards if you're going to be working with different cards in the GH6. We only have a couple that we've been able to fully validate that they work and they're designed and they keep up with the speed and everything. So yeah, so that's the main setup here. If I need anything on a gimbal, if I want to be filming anything or, you know, going on a walk, that's where I use my RS-C2. So I use the lesser expensive of them. And this thing's a tank. I've used it at almost every trade show so far, every event where I'm going out into the field and shooting. And then, yeah, I can connect in over USB and control. The downside there is that the USB port, if I'm powering it with the DTAP battery, is obviously going to be blocked a bit because it's, you know, if I'm powering over that, I can't plug into the Ronin. But usually at that point, I'm not really ever that much, you know, that worried for it. And then traveling wise, a good bag is always, you know, kind of a key thing here. And I use a fairly nice, kind of relatively customized Peak Design everyday backpack that's got the LUMIX logo embroidered on it. And yeah, this ends up holding all the equipment that we need. So yeah, there's so much of what we can set up. Now, when I go out into the field with this camera, one of the things you'll notice is I have a step ring. This is the 9mm that we just came out with. I have a step ring that's going up from, I think it's 55mm up to 77. So 55 to 77, and then this way I can use the same filters across the board for all of my other lenses. So for my NDs, my polarizers, all that kind of stuff, same filter thread. This particular one that I got off, I think I got it off Amazon or something, got it online. It was really inexpensive, and it's thin enough, or it's slim enough that with a slim filter, it doesn't interfere with the 9mm field of view on this. So yeah, that's pretty much the rig that I use for out in the field. When it comes to the settings that I use, vast majority of the time, if you've been watching Lumix Live for a while, you'll know that I'm a like 709 shooter for the vast majority of the things that I create. I am not the best at color grading. I would never claim to be. So most of the time it's like 709. I make sure that I use something like a color checker or one of these simple, I always forget what the name of this is, an Expo disc, to do my white balancing, to make sure that everything is, you know, kind of as close as I can get it out of camera. And then I shoot it, send it into Premiere, which is my editing software of choice. And then I'm pretty much good to go. I don't really ever have to worry too much about the editing side, because I try to get it as close to right as I can out in the field. Now, if you're a wedding videographer or an event videographer, you may not have all the control of all of the lighting scenarios. So things are a little different for you there. That's where things like shooting in Vlog can be a big benefit, because you've got the flexibility in post. But something that you'll realize quickly as you work with a lot of our cameras is that you've got a ton of flexibility in the 10-bit options that we have here. So one, I've got better color gradations available at my fingertips because it's 10-bit. But then I also have the ability of doing things like log recording, where I've got way more latitude in the highlights than a lot of people think. The GH6, as an example, if I have DR boost turned off, I get about 4.5 stops over middle gray. If I have it turned on, it's about 5.5 stops. So you get an extra stop of highlight recovery in this camera, which means I can have the ability to, you know, have my shots a little more overexposed than normal to keep my midtones and skin tones roughly in about 42 IRE. And then I can just bring it into post and just, you know, pull down the highlights and bring it all back into range. Let's see here. Super Zero says, so would a more powerful processor like a dual processor with one dedicated for AF be helpful? Theoretically it could. That's a major architecture difference though. That's a huge architectural change for a camera manufacturer to do. I think some have done it, but I haven't seen many do it consistently. But I also haven't really been following up too closely on processor technology for other camera brands. Let's see here. Super Zero says, I shoot with a BG on a battery grip on the GH4, 5, and 5.2. You like the redundancy. I use DC coupler plugs into power banks. Wired up sleeve, down shirt, power bank in the back pocket, less weight on my camera. USB-C ports could be a problem in crowded situation, afraid it will snap. DC coupler hangs low and not protruding. So one thing I'm going to kind of maybe advise a little bit. DC couplers plugged into a USB power bank, be incredibly cautious with those. We do not ever condone that use, mainly because the DC coupler to a USB power bank, if you're not buying one that is, you know, properly set up for voltage, I know USB power banks usually aren't crazy high in voltage, but now that a lot of them are USB PD, like as a good example, this is the one that we primarily use. It's one of the Anchor PD ones. You know, this is capable of outputting 20 volt. If you send 20 volts into the camera without any kind of protection, you're going to break something. The way I get around the concern about USB cables hanging up on a lot of these cameras, if you noticed on my GH6 rig, I have a very tiny USB cable. This ultra short one lets me keep this plugged right in and then cable tied in, so that the chances of you snagging anything that's right in this area, let me hold it up so you can actually see it. The chances of you snagging anything that's right in here, as long as you cable manage it right, is incredibly small. And then there's also right angle USB-C adapters as well. And then if you use the small rig stuff, they have a cable clamp that can lock it into the camera port. You're not gonna get it out of there if you're using something like that. Let's see here. We are much longer than I had anticipated to be by this point. quickly, the only other stuff that I use when we're out in the field that's a really nice, solid option here. 2 different styles of microphones. If you've been following, you know that I'm a big fan of the Sennheiser AVX system. It's a bit pricey, but I've had incredibly good luck with these in relatively congested environments. And these things have been just great. They work awesome. If I'm working out in a field too, where I don't necessarily need the AVX system, that's where I will use this Sarmonic TX or RX9 system here, UW Mic 9. And this thing has been awesome to work with. This, it's 3.5 millimeter into the camera. And this particular one allows you to have 2 transmitters, so I can do an interview style setup with 1 receiver, 2 transmitters. And it makes things just super straightforward to work with. Let's see here. Super Zero, or Marcus says, afraid of the same thing. No small rig, USB-C, HDMI breakout module like that for the pocket camera yet. Well, you know, you want to buy a LUMIX camera, so. Let's see here. Alan says he has a right angle USB-C cord that directs the cord straight down. Yep, that's a really good, solid option. Marcus says if the USB-C port on the camera gets damaged or just becomes loose over the years, there's no way to get it replaced. Nah, that's not true. USB-C ports can be replaced. Most manufacturers usually end up just swapping out the main board instead of having to go in and do port replacement. It's usually just easier to replace the whole main board and then send it back. But yeah. Super Zero, I use adapted cable that regulates power delivery to the camera. Okay. Yeah, I mean, just as a comment from the brand, we do not condone or cover any damage that happens through those since we don't make the product. It's not designed to do that. I just, have to make sure I let people know. But as far as those USB-C cables, it's a simple, I got this off Amazon for like $9. It's not a data cable, but it's just a power cable. So, let's see here. TS says, is there an XLR2 one day? No idea. If you have recommendations of what you'd want an XLR replacement to do, drop them in the chat. We can always pass it on. Let's see here. McMedia and Film. Ran my GH5 Mark II for 3 hours nonstop filming a show and had plugged into the mains and didn't miss a single beat. Yeah, plugging a camera right into the mains, yeah, you're going to be able to record nonstop and have no issues with anything there. Let's see here. So, I think that's kind of probably it for today. A lot of really cool questions from everybody in the chat. Thank you so much for everything that you all have asked and provided answers for others as well. If there are specific settings that you do for your cameras, for your different designs and rigs, let us know in the comments. Let us know over on platforms like Instagram or on Facebook. We love seeing how people rig their cameras out. It's kind of like, there's so much variety there, and no two are ever really going to look alike. So, if you're proud of your setup, show it to us. Tag us in Instagram, tag us over on Facebook. Let us see them. Maybe we'll feature your rig if you want us to. Let's see here. Cool. With that, thank you all so much for tuning in this week. I'm going to take a lot of the feedback from here, and maybe we'll do a more in-depth kind of studio tour setup to actually show you what all this stuff looks like. It would be a very short kind of part of a stream at some point. But we'll be back live next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to have all of July's streams up and ready to post so that you'll know what's coming up throughout the month. Within the next week or so. So definitely, if you haven't already, and you feel that the conversation or the entertainment value that I give you was worth it, I'd appreciate a like on this video. If we've earned a subscribe, that's awesome. That helps me continue to keep doing these things and bring more stuff out to everybody. Outside of that, Quick reminder, LUMIX Pro Services here in the United States. We've got Red and Platinum. Be sure to check them out. If you're interested in any of these platforms. The Red tier is free, so if you've just got a camera, definitely check out the Red tier at least. It's free. And then, yeah, we'll be back next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. If you're in the United States, I hope you have a great holiday weekend. Spending time, family, friends, going out, creating some cool photos. If you take some cool photos or create some cool images or videos over the weekend, let us know. Let us see them. Tag LUMIX USA in the posts, and I just love seeing what all of y'all create. So, yeah, with that, take care, everybody. Have a great weekend. I will see you all next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks.